Hey everybody, welcome to What the Flick. We're all back. Ben, Alonzo, Christy, Matt. Recently aired on HBO, the latest documentary from Alex Gibney, and people are still talking about it, so now we are too.
It is called, what's it called?
Going Clear.
Going Clear, Scientology and the Prison of Belief. So there's people called Scientologists. Perhaps you've heard of them. They are very perky and intense, and they are quite popular in Hollywood. But if you cross them, they will go after you, which is what Alex Gibney found when he tried to make this film. If you try to leave the church, they will come after you, as a lot of the very, very high-ranking people found when they tried to leave. It is chilling. You may have read or seen a lot of this in previous incarnations, but it is chilling all in one place. Take a look.
Someone had told me there's this cult, and they'll make anything possible in your life.
I was deeply convinced that we were going to save the world.
It was a transcendent experience.
You feel euphoric.
Everything you do for endless trillions of years depends on what you do with and in Scientology.
They sell it all in the beginning as something quite logical.
You take on a matrix of thought that is not your own.
It's so strong that it sticks you like glue.
Controllable, very suggestible.
You just don't see it happening to you. You justify so much.
There is no logical explanation other than faith.
Okay, so who read the New Yorker piece or read the book? I read the article in the New Yorker.
I read some excerpts of the book. I want to read the book, but I do, if a Scientology had a juicy bit of story crosses my path, I will,
Sure,
I will
every
read
time.
it.
Yeah,
you know.
same. Yeah.
When the Tom Cruise YouTube stuff leaked, you know.
Yeah, I was at TMZ when that Tom Cruise YouTube, and that was one of my best pieces at TMZ. Just a montage of his woo, these peculiar sounds that came out of him.
He's kind of like George W. Bush too, in that way of like, I'm telling you something important, and why are you too stupid to get it? You know?
Well, and that video too, like he's so intense, and I turned to my wife as we're watching it, I said, is he all coked up on this?
Well, it's weird.
He's high on being
He's
clear.
high on Ron.
But that part in the movie is cut together with Jason Beghe, right? That's how we say his
Beghe,
last
I think.
Beghe. Beghe, you're saying?
I thought it was Beghe.
All right, whatever.
All right.
Anyway, really nice
was
actor,
great in
good
this.
actor, and he's great in this, and he's intense. He was Scientologist for about 10 years and
14
and left,
years,
and
long
then
time.
he was ready to go after 3. He was like, okay, I feel good. This is good. I got my. And then they stuck him
so
with
easy.
10 more
No.
years, right? Another decade. So I thought that was really effective because what he's saying, and when you get his perspective on that, to me, that's exactly what Cruise is doing. Is a guy who is miserable and struggling and is no. The thing I'm doing can't just be okay. It's great because he's like, no, I'm all in. I don't go halfway. I'm so happy. And having the Jason Beghe stuff there with it, I thought was really powerful.
Yeah, I think the first-person testimony is really what makes this movie so powerful, like you were saying. It's one thing to read it, but it's another thing to actually hear these people tell their stories.
Over and over again.
Yeah, and especially the people who used to be like the big bulldogs of this religion who would shout down reporters and da-da-da, to then see them now being like, this was a crock. It's kind of like how, when the first wave of Cosby accusers, they just want money, they just want fame. And then you had people like established women who didn't need the money and didn't want the attention coming forward. It's like, these are going to be harder to dismiss. And when you have these people who were lieutenants of Miscavige, who are super inner circle, who are now on the outside spilling the dirt, it's like, no, you can't dismiss
you
these
can't.
guys.
You have to. Something's wrong with you if you dismiss this evidence. I mean, Cosby's a great example. Like you've reached a point where, come on, this conspiracy makes absolutely no sense. Also, the photos. This movie works on the photos alone. These guys salute each other. That's insane.
Well, they're all in military gear. They're all in like naval
They dress like they're in the Navy when they go to
Sea Org.
board meetings. It's insane.
Well, and
it
they
is
talk-
insane.
Yeah, they show footage from that event at the LA Sports Arena, right? And
From '93,
From '93, and they talk about the Nazi iconography, and it's not like there's swastikas around, but it looks like a scene.
It's a Lenny Riefenstahl
right.
moment.
I mean,
yeah.
it looks like a scene from Triumph of the Will. This movie, I think, is a great example of the power of the documentary as an art form in that, look, like for those of us who have watched these stories come to light and the things that come out of reports about Scientology, there's no surprises here, right?
That's
This is
right.
all stuff
That's
we've
right.
heard before. But to see the human cost of, especially at the end, if people are talking about the disconnects that happen, and how families are encouraged to just separate and shun. It's heartbreaking. And then the other thing is to see some of those, the number 2 and number 3 guys in that organization, see that abject regret on their faces is kind of amazing.
Yeah, what were they thinking? Like, they're grown men and they're like, what the hell was I thinking?
Right, and that's a great part. Well, for 2 things that are great. You touched on both of them. The first is, it's one thing to read these stories over the last 17 years and piece them together. The power of the documentary puts them all together. And then puts in what I haven't quite seen over that time is because I hadn't read the book, is the number of high-ranking officials here telling a story that is really indisputable because it's too similar, and not in the similar way that where the wives came out in that great novel with Anderson Cooper.
That was creepy.
But the other thing that I loved is their honesty about how it could have happened. They have no explanation other than shame and regret and weakness. And it's why when somebody leaves the church, even if it's like Marty Rathman, who was like the number 2 guy for a long time and engaged in some hideous things, played a significant role in breaking up Tom and Nicole's marriage and separating Nicole from her kids. I mean, these are despicable acts.
Tom Cruise's lawyer disputes.
Oh,
this.
sorry, I'm sorry.
There's that side
According to the movie, right? Yeah. I don't think is there a smaller font you can put on screen?
Because I had the closed captions on and I had to turn them off to go back and read what that was.
Because there were 160 lawyers who vetted this thing.
Is that right?
Yeah, HBO had 160 lawyers before it would air.
But that is anyone who to me, the obligation of the rest of us in the sane world is when anybody leaves this church, no matter what they've done, you have to welcome them openly. Like, you can't, there's no criticism that I can give these guys for leaving, because you look at the people who haven't left, there's so many. And the fact that these guys talked about their shame, it reminded me a little of the Blacklist debate. That you had guys like Kazan, who then makes a terrific movie on the waterfront and then pretends that it excuses his behavior. No, sometimes you have to turn in your friends. Those guys were murderers. These guys just were part of the group theater in 1936, and you wrecked their lives. Like, this is a different thing, and shame on Kazan for never recognizing it. Shame for life, because and then you have guys like Sterling Hayden, like who did give names because he would have lost his career, and then felt like it was the worst thing that he's ever done. And to me, then you want to take those guys. You want to take Sterling Hayden retroactively and give him a hug.
Sure.
Like, that was a terrible position you put themselves in. You feel shame, and you should, and it's okay, and now you're forgiven. And these guys all were so honest about their shame. Like, I don't know, man, but I can't believe I did it. I'm so regretful.
One thing I'm curious about, one thing I'm curious about, though, Alex Gibney is so thorough and so notoriously thorough that you feel like you're cramming for a final exam when you're watching his films. But there's a bunch of big stuff that's not in here.
Yeah, Mrs. Miscavige disappearance.
The whole thing with Shelley Miscavige being gone for the last 8 years. The name Katie Holmes is never even mentioned once in here, but they do go into great detail about the plucking and grooming of...
From Homeland. I didn't realize that was her.
I'd forgotten that she was a blip in his life there briefly. So there's stuff that I wonder, I'd like to know the backstory of why that's not mentioned, because Katie Holmes was his wife for a long time. They have a kid. There's no mention of her being chosen to be his wife.
A Vulture or something had the 21 things that weren't in that movie.
Also, Leah Remini and her leaving and her filing missing persons report.
And I think they probably figured that Haggis sort of, and Jason Beghe to some extent, represented all of the kind of high-profile exits that you could only get to so much in 2 hours.
There is a lot of stuff going on here, but I like that Gibney is able to connect the dots in certain ways. Haggis talks about how his reaction when he first starts seeing the secrets about Xenu, and his reaction is kind of, what the fuck is this? And then the guy from The Village Voice, who talks about, look, you go to any major religion in the world, and right off the bat, any adherent to that religion will tell you pretty quickly what the core beliefs are. But Scientology, like, you got to spend 7 years, you can spend years and a bunch of money getting
thousands
into
of dollars
it, right?
to get there.
And if you've heard it in the beginning, you'd have been like, come on, man.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Volcanoes with frozen people being dumped into them.
And A-bombs, yeah.
Yeah, this is a fascinating documentary. There's a lot of stuff that I'd like to see followed up on, like Marty Rathman's wife suing Miscavige for harassment, which they kind of touch on that a little bit, and then you don't hear anything else. So my suspicion is that's still...
I think that's still
pending.
His current wife, not the previous wife.
Right. Monique.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to see that. I want to see, like, the long saga with Miscavige's wife. I want to see Megan Ellison get in her head to do a long lead, like, deep investigative story where she pays someone to fund them to get higher up in
Right.
the hierarchy with secret cameras and then have it all on it. Like that's the
And
dream.
how do you
movie.
pull them out though?
But,
How do you rescue
I
them?
feel like the people who've gotten to those levels have already been leaving and are telling their stories. Like that would almost be redundant at this point because I'm sure Haggis was like OT 8 or whatever. You know, I'm sure they told him he
Only
could.
one lady was OT 8.
Oh, okay.
That was one lady at the end.
You're right. Sorry, but you know, I'm lost in the bridge. But you know,
Until there's an OT 9, by the way. Until
Yeah,
they
To
get-
add more
yeah,
courses,
totally.
spend
Yeah.
more money,
But
right?
the stuff from the Apostates is really interesting in here. I mean, you could probably do an individual 2-3 hour story about each one of these guys, and seeing the stuff that Rothman goes through as he's got his blog and like the camera people that have been sent to his house to harass
That
him.
was crazy. Those guys
Right.
are those guys
Operation Squirrel or
The little
whatever.
matching shirts and
smiles
their hats.
and the hats and the glasses. Oh my
And
God,
the movie's
Jesus.
fairly damning to people like Tom Cruise and John Travolta who clearly know what's going on
Right.
and aren't doing anything.
Right, well, because they're the beneficiaries of being superstars in it. One
Right.
thing too that's so
Although-
crazy-
And they're terrified of whatever's in that
Although
file.
keep in
Right,
mind
right,
that,
right.
that,
They're audits,
I believe
yes.
it was Haggis pointed out that only when maybe it wasn't Haggis, but it was someone that other moderately famous that only later recognized, like knew what was weird, and then
Abuse.
only recognized how bad. I think it was Beghe who said and then I realized what was happening at the Sea Org. Like he had no clue what was happening there, and so maybe Cruise and
They just
Travolta
don't
didn't
know. They're
for some
shielded.
time. Maybe they're shielded
One thing
because they
that's
said, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but like he never read. Paul Haggis, who was a interesting, thoughtful guy, did not read one negative piece about Scientology.
Right.
Like they've got
You're
it in
not
their
supposed
heads. They just think, oh,
Right, stay off
It's
the
all-
internet.
Basically, that's
yeah,
what
yeah,
the
yeah.
internet, right. One thing that's so creepy though, when
Which
you
is
see
good advice for everybody. Stay off.
Don't read the comments. When you see Tom Cruise and David Miscavige, the guy who's in charge of the whole thing. We see them
Miscarriage.
together, right? You see that actually Tom Cruise has like patterned his speech patterns and his hair.
Oh, the picture of the two of them with the
and
motorcycles was
everything.
creepy.
And they're just like, this is who he wants to be. Like, we want to be movie stars. He wants to be this guy. And that's
Yeah.
what's so
Here's
creepy.
my question.
yeah, that's a good point.
How short is Miscavige? Because
It's gotta
he's
be
Gotta be like
five-
five.
it's gotta be
He's
5'4"
shorty.
tops,
Yeah.
max out at 5'4". Also,
so he's the Napoleon of Scientology.
Miscavige.
their greetings
Napoleon.
are spooky. You know, they're like,
Yes, and when they're
Every
saluting
time.
the
And salute.
Hubbard photo.
LRH. Hey, he's not an officer in the military, and he lied about his military
Right.
record, and that's overwhelmingly true because no one has radiation burns lifted from their body by thinking really hard how to lift those.
Taking niacin
Whatever.
supplements or whatever it is they do.
I don't know. I like all those things. Leah Remini, Katie Holmes, all of those things could have been in there. But I never felt like 1 minute of that part of what we had in there dragged. So you guys are really asking for a
3 hour
three
movie.
hour
I would
movie.
like more. This is like
Well,
the rare
but
2-hour
you know,
documentary that could have
sure.
been longer.
There were a
yeah.
couple things that occurred to me as watching the movie. Like it
Frederick
talks about
Wiseman's
how
Scientology.
talks about how great Travolta and Cruise have it, as opposed to some of the lower level
Yeah.
people. The
Oh,
shit they
yeah.
go through, and I thought, boy, that's emblematic of the 1% versus everybody else.
Totally, yeah, yeah.
Right? There's some of that. It's just this fascinating look at a cult. It's fascinating that there's less than 50,000 members.
That's what's
and
telling.
they've got
But they lie.
1.5 billion in the bank.
three
Well,
now.
now it's like $3 billion worth of property
property,
around
yeah.
the world.
Well, when you
But-
soak your members for all their money and you're tax exempt, whew.
Oh,
Also,
man.
they say they have over 1 million members, which is BS because they count anybody who's ever like walked into a meeting or taken a stress test. They count that as like having been touched by Scientology.
Ernest Lehman counts. The great-
Really?
Yeah. But
well, William S. Burroughs, I
know.
had no idea.
But
That was a
those
shocker.
guys all presumably were in there for like
They had lunch at
Everything,
the Celebrity
yeah,
Center or
yeah.
whatever.
my only criticism, the only thing I think that makes this not perfect is that I thought they could have done a slightly better job giving us a temporal sense. Like they did move around very quickly from talking about in one era and then all of a sudden we're back to talking about the 1950s. Showing clips from different times was a little hard for me I had to decide, okay, I guess time doesn't matter here. I would have liked some more keys for when stuff was happening.
I mean, I kind of felt like, I mean, you're right, they do jump back and forth, but I sort of felt like, you know, if you're seeing Hubbard footage, you know, it's the 50s. And if you're, you know, if it's, I felt fairly clear about when we were in the narrative, but I see your point.
I thought it was perfect. That's literally that's what's going to knock me down from a 10 on this.
Also, doesn't it make the master seem so much creepier when
Does.
you see the old Hubbard footage? Like he looked just like him.
Well-
Also, really fast, the blue building, the big blue Scientology building on Sunset, which they show a lot of in aerial shots, was the hospital where I was born.
Really?
Yeah, there's
It
a lot
was
of nice-
Cedars of Lebanon Hospital.
Wow.
That's where I was born.
There's a lot of nice
So,
drone
like a
camera work.
retroactive Scientologist.
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
nice drone camera
Yes.
work of that building.
A lot of, yeah.
You know, that archive footage of Hubbard and then some of that footage from those events of Miscavige, you can see the charisma there. And that's one of the really scary things, is this is a great look at like how even Hubbard is, as kooky as his ideas are, he's a charming guy. And Miscavige, when he's on stage, like, boy, he sells that room.
They're charming.
It's a literal cult of personality.
Right, they're charming until you start listening. But like right in the beginning of the movie, and we got to go. But right in the beginning of the movie, just the nonsense about the boundary. As you reach the boundary without boundaries, and you're like, what is he saying? These words mean nothing. They mean nothing. And then there's just like, wow.
When you're done watching us, go look on YouTube for We Stand Tall.
Ooh.
The video.
The We Are the World style video they did. It's 5 minutes long. Amazing production values.
Wow.
Okay, so what is your number then?
I give it an 8.
I'm also saying 8.
Yeah, I 8.
Yeah, I give. Like I said, I was at 10, but I got confused about the time. I
Okay.
think it's perfect. 9.5. I really loved it.
Okay, so 8.4 is our number.
Yeah, it's 95% on the tomato meter, certified fresh.